Hello everybody, welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself George bringing you a brand new review, and today I'm going to be talking about Tron Uprising, the animated series, which of course aired in 2012 and into 2013, many years ago, back on Disney. And I'm going to be giving my thoughts on the series for, I think, if I'm completely honest, the very first time, not only on camera, but I don't even think I've spoken to show to anyone, unless it's just been me recommending a show or moaning on Twitter that something got cancelled that shouldn't have, which is obviously going to be a big discussion part later on. But we are, of course, building up to the release of Tron Ares, which comes out on October the 10th, and every Tuesday we're going to be doing a new review for you. Of course, last week me and Aaron spoke about the original 1982 Tron film. Next week, as you can guess, we'll be talking about Tron Legacy, and today I am going solo for this video as I talk about Tron Uprising, which I can't even say season 1, it's the only season that they ever made, and it's a series that unfortunately I'm gutted that will never return, probably ever, even if the new film grossed $3 billion, which we obviously know is not going to happen. They still wouldn't bring it back. Then we'd have to get a Jared Leto series. But I'm going to be giving my thoughts with my memories on it, going through a couple of episodes, big discussion point on the characters. I've rewatched the entire series in preparation for this over the last couple of weeks, and just for discussion point, if you're curious about how we approach these reviews, I reviewed the first one with Aaron. We pre-recorded that maybe like a week before that aired. Then I've spent the last couple of weeks watching this as and when I can, ready for recording tonight. And then when this review is done, obviously me talking, I'll then be literally watching Legacy the next day to then review Legacy with Aaron, because I wanted to approach this in chronological order, and it's actually really interesting, and it gives me a completely different perspective on not only the original but potentially Legacy, which I'll talk about in next week's video, seeing this in a different narrative. I'll be making some comparisons to a series which people may already compare this to, but maybe I'll be doing it in a different way. So I'm really excited to actually talk about this for the first time. As always, I do want to hear from people, particularly if you've seen the show. If you haven't seen the series, I'm going to talk big spoilers. I'm going to be hyping up this show, but it is available to watch on Disney Plus, so you can watch it on there whether you're in America or UK. I really recommend watching this on Disney Plus. Genuinely, it's not even me joking or being OTT. It's a series that not enough people have seen, and vastly improves the franchise, if we can call it that at this point, whilst being a great Tron Legacy prequel, displaying what happened obviously after the events of the first Tron film, after Clue's hostile takeover of the grid. We get to spend time in this, so I'm going to be getting into all of that. So I would love to hear from people on this one. As you can tell, we're not live, I'm recording it by myself. Anyone that does drop a comment, I will reply to it. I will have a look at those. And if I sound a bit strange, I've been ill the last couple of days. I'm literally recording this on the Sunday night straight after a video I did with Ren, because today's the best I've been feeling, and this is meant to come out on Tuesday. And if I end up taking a turn for the worst tomorrow, I'm screwed getting this edited, uploaded and done. So I hope this comes across okay. And that's to me in post-production as well. But let's talk. And if I end up looking down a lot, I've been doing this with the Harry Potter series we did recently on adapting the books. With this being a TV series, I've had to have a whole stack of notes, and my camera is up there. My notes and my laptop screen are down here as I switch my setups depending on whether I'm doing videos with people or doing videos solo. So if I'm looking down, it's not me being lazy, it's just there's a lot of notes on here, and I wanted to approach the show in the right way. As I said, because I might be trying to sell this to people for the first time. But with that in mind, I think it's time to start talking Tron Uprising. And the IMDb plot synopsis for this one is: in the computer world of the grid, a young program joins Tron's fight against their world's tyranny. Quite simple to the point. We'll get into characters shortly, but I want to talk about memories of the series. Now, I didn't see this when it came out. My understanding is this aired on CBBC here in the UK. Any Americans that are unfamiliar with that, that's basically what we'd watched growing up, like childhood wise. Now, I was 16 when this series came out, when it started in, well, just about to be 16 in sort of summer 2012. I was a huge fan at school of Legacy after it came out. A lot of people went to school. We'll talk about the fact that I just basically, after that film came out, I just put Daft Punk on all the time. I was also on my headphones cycling to work. At one point, I talk about in the Legacy video, I almost had the disc Bluetooth Apple dock station, if anyone ever saw that back in the day. We went to get it and it sold out, and I was traumatized, and I never got it, and I always wanted to but just never did. Could never get it on eBay. I did remember reading years later that they'd always get damaged, so maybe it was a bullet dodged with that one. So I was very late to this. I was so late, in fact, that I saw this series for the first time in 2019 when I first got Disney Plus. So the background of that was Disney Plus launched in America first. There's these things called VPNs, which ironically have become very popular recently here in the UK, and I used it to access Disney Plus way before it ever came out here in the UK. I was able to watch like shows I grew up with, like Even Stevens. I was really excited with it all, and I finally got around to watching Tron Uprising because I'd heard about this Tron series. It was animated. I didn't want to watch it illegally. It's had no sort of discs, Blu-ray, anything like that here in the UK. There was no way to watch it. It wasn't traceable. I know it says here it was done on CBBC here in the UK. It wasn't known to us. It's not sat on the iPlayer. So this was a series I never had the opportunity to see until Disney Plus launched, which is testament to Disney Plus, if I'm being truthfully honest. And I was completely blown away watching it for the first time, if I'm going to be totally honest with you. I did not know what to expect. I knew it was an animated series. I knew that obviously it had been cancelled, that viewership was low. I knew there were some big names involved with regards to the voice cast and a couple of other things. So, yeah, I had an experience with that. Also, apologies if I look weird on camera. I've been at home. My eyes just started watering. I think it's the light just there, so I'm just going to rub that. I'm not crying because Tron got cancelled, do not worry. I might be crying when Aries comes out. It's as bad as Jared Leto's other films have been recently. But safe to say I got to this one pretty late, and I loved it. And I just remember tweeting the Mercy about how Disney cancelled it, and I was so angry and gutted, etc., 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 several years later to the party. But it's important to look at the behind the scenes of this, because this is different to the films. Of course, this came out after Legacy, but being set before Legacy, and the animation itself is done, I think, very distinct in regards to the grid, the universe this is set within, taking on the iconography, imagery of Tron Legacy more so than the original Tron, but at times it wants to lend itself to both. Something that fits in between the original and what is newer, but with a more distinct feature into the newer stuff. And the animation works perfectly for that. Now, it is 3D animated. It looks very two-dimensional at times, but it has a 3D animation, but done in a slightly different way, particularly when people are being de-resed and whatnot. So it's got a really distinct animation style. And at the time of reading, it was apparently inspired by the Clone Wars and a couple of other stuff that was brought on board. Now, one of the big producers involved in the series was the director, is Charlie Bean. He worked on all the episodes of the series. He's the one that spoke about it publicly as well. The story was developed by Edward Kitsis and Adam Horowitz as well, who are both involved in Once Upon a Time. If anyone's familiar with those, I think they're like CW type shows. So there was a bit of a creative team behind it. There is no credits to Steven Lisberger, except the usual traditional based on, created by, etc., etc. He wasn't involved as such, which is very surprising given what I think the show does for Tron as a series, as a franchise. And I'm going to talk about the ironic title legacy of this towards the end of this review. But I think it's really important to determine that this wasn't just trying to be Tron Legacy in animated form. It wasn't just trying to cash in on that franchise. It was trying to tell a story something different. And I think by the story focusing on what was going on at the time of Clue taking over, taking the story of somebody else, and I'll get into characters shortly, but I think it plays very well. And a real big comparison I'm going to make for this series is that it reminds me of what the Clone Wars did for the Star Wars prequels. Granted, Tron is completely different in that respect. You know, there's 2, almost 3 films out. They're set decades apart, the first 2 films, and this is set in an uprising within that. But like what the Clone Wars did for those prequel films, it enhances the world building, the storytelling, the character development, and the events of the series. It does it all in a really interesting manner by not just chucking in generic action sequences here and there. There are characters brought in with a lot of depth, and I don't mean that in like a mocking term of saying, oh, they've got development. You have characters who could look at like 2-dimensional villains, and the more you learn about them, the more you feel them, you start to realize, hold on, there's so much that's gone on there within their lives. They've had this impact, and this is what they wanted to be or could have been. and I felt like it develops the world, it develops the characters involved, and that then enhances what happens in Legacy, how important the Uprising is, and what it is for the programs to believe to want to upend Clue. I think it's a really distinct parallel, and it's a really interesting parallel for an animated series that did it too. Like the Clone Wars, it was cancelled. Obviously, this one didn't get to be finished, and obviously Clone Wars was cancelled for political reasons to do with the Cartoon Network, and obviously Disney purchasing Star Wars around the same time, ironically, if you actually think about it. But yes, there's a lot of Clone Wars comparisons to me, so I wanted to get them out of the way early, and as I kind of start, I think it does a phenomenal work for the film surrounding it, because it does develop the world of the Grid that much more than the films have been able to do, which is understandable because it's a 19 episode series. Of course there's going to be more time to bring in different characters, more characters, and do things, but we've seen shows in the past that do spin-offs and they don't work out in that respective way, whereas this one goes into that vision of, okay, let's improve and enhance everything around us. And I think that's where the show truthfully delivers for me. So I'm going to stop the Clone Wars talk there, and I'm going to start really getting into it by talking about the characters. So, kick-starting with the lead, we've got Beck, played by Elijah Wood, aka Frodo Baggins, in a role which I really enjoy him in. Obviously, it's hard not to think about Frodo when we think of him, but the character of Beck is obviously playing the lead. He is someone that's seen one of his best friends killed by Clue, and in turn wants to become part of an uprising against Clue because of what they've done with their occupation in their city. And he's a very interesting character, and it gets tricky at this point talking about him because he isn't developed at the level of certain leads and whatnot. He has to take a traditional, not necessarily chosen one approach, but he is being trained up as the renegade to be the next Tron, to be the face of a new uprising, and by that story choice he's somewhat more limited. And across the series we get some really great moments with him where, like Spider-Man, you see the reality of, can you keep your personal life away from your professional life? Can you really keep that mask on whilst the people you know are in trouble and there's nothing you can do about it? It's a consequence of having to put them aside to improve on that. And the series does a great job at interweaving that personal life, the people around him, who he cares for, who is he basically fighting for. He's fighting for not just the programs but for his friends, the people he cares for. So he's a really interesting character in that perspective, and he is quite likeable, even at moments when you're meant to disagree with him in regards to the story, or he makes bad choices. As far as a protagonist goes in Tron, he's pretty good, he's quite likeable. Like I will say for many of the characters, I wish we'd have got more, and I'm going to say that so many times tonight, but Beck I thought was really great, and I loved that Elijah Wood gave a voice in this. I thought he was a great voice performance. Then obviously I've spoken about who's being trained by. Of course he's being trained by Tron, and this is the big talking point of this, is obviously the events of Tron Legacy. You get the flashback with Clue. It's implied that he betrays him there and there, he takes down Tron, then he's reprogrammed into Rinsler. Big part of obviously Tron Legacy, we'll get to that next week, but what the show does, and this is again the Clone Wars comparison for me, it takes up the smallest thread of a story and then turns that into an entire story arc suited elsewhere, but has no impact lost when you're watching that film, but it will enhance something. I think a moment in Star Wars a lot of people talk about these days is when in Revenge of the Sith they go into the war room with Anakin. Now we know through the Clone Wars that Ahsoka was literally there 30 seconds before and wanted to speak to him too. So you get those sorts of things that go on. But Tron in this, voiced by Bruce Boxleitner, which is great because he doesn't really get much to do in Tron Legacy, and I'm assuming he won't be in Tron Ares. This is kind of the most we ever get from him as Tron outside the original film. And I love the concept that he is this wounded soldier, that whatever happened to him, he can't be a rebellion, he can't be the face, he has to train someone to take his place to be the next Tron in order to stop Clue and all the others. He plays the mentor figure so well, and it actually gets to develop him throughout the show. We get moments of him at his weakest, we get moments of him where he's at his most selfish, where he's seeking revenge. He's dropping the act of, let's say, the greater good in terms of his personal revenge and who he wants to get at. And it's some really great episodes, particularly those that involve Dyson. And when they want to do development or talking about what happened historically, the Tron and Dyson stuff, I think, is a perfect example of that. That you've got all these other differential meaning security programs within the Grid, and it's great to see how it functions in that regard. So I liked having Tron in this at a reduced role. He's in it just the right amount of time, and it doesn't take away from Beck being the lead from this, but he works in that supporting guidance figure. And obviously where the series goes, where it doesn't go, where it gets cancelled. But when we get to the ending of the season, where it puts him in a healthy state, that would have been a phenomenal setup, because ultimately there is an end game, and the end game was always him clearly being captured by Clue and turned into Rinza. So whilst it's a definitive, we know what happens eventually, the series is about, okay, so how do we get to that point? And that's the point I think so many people wanted to find out more about. So there's a couple of other of the good guys, let's call them. We've got Mara and Zed, played by Mandy Moore and Nate Caudry. They're obviously Beck's colleagues with him at work. They're his closest friends, the personal side. We get a lot of time with them. Not too much development, more very stereotypical, I believe in him, I don't believe in him. But there's enough personality and charisma with the performances, with the writing as well, where they work as a duo alongside him. And at times, whether they're against the Renegade or they're for the Renegade, there's a good dynamic there. And I think they really help with the animation side, that ultimately, for an animated series airing on Disney XD, the target demographic is children, not adults. And I think these two function in that, with one of the villains I'll talk about later on. But a character that sort of sits with them a lot is Abel, voiced by Reginald Vell-Johnson, who I think is superb in the show. He's one of the best characters. It comes across at one point as maybe predictable or the very typical boss in the workplace, but when obviously we get the revelation that he's known that Beck is the Renegade all along, he's not lecturing him, he's not telling him off, he's not telling him go anymore, he actually wants to support him and be there for him. It opens up a different dynamic, and then you get more of his backstory, that he knows Tron and he's been working with Tron before, and there's so many great things going on. And he obviously does die towards the end of the series in probably one of the most shocking moments. Has a great story through to that point, with his death opening questions and people framing the Renegade for that. I loved the character of Abel, gutted he went, but it was great to see a completed character arc for at least somebody in the series, and he's obviously the person that got that. And again, it's a character you could have loved to learn more about. If there'd been more seasons, could they have maybe delved into his background before, or learned more about how did he get into the place he did, how did he meet Tron, what was their relationship. He is a phenomenal, and it's great to have a second mentor figure for Beck, who cares more about the Beck personal side, whereas Tron is more the business side, whilst obviously the pair do cross over at times of what they do and do not believe in. So the core characters from the good guys. The villains, there's a fair few to talk about. We've got General Tesla, pun obviously intended on the name, voiced by Lance Henriksen, who I very much like in this. He's got a great presence, he's got a very cool design. He is the general of this region of the grid that Clue has obviously him running. It's his responsibility to get the Renegade. He's got this really cool Iron Fist type thing that I don't think we've seen in live action. He works as a Saturday type villain, that he's the overarching villain of this series, whilst Clue is the head of the top of the mountain, I guess you could say. He's one of the important parts in that, and he's got a great relationship with other characters, and it's interesting to spend time with him to see what he is like. There's not much development there because he's a villain in an animated Disney show, but when we see how villainous he is at times with other people, again, another character I'm going to say wish we had more time to spend with. I'm going to talk about Pavel as well, played by Paul Rubens, who is the very stereotypical Saturday morning cartoon. He's the snivelling, horrible, idiotic villain who's going to try and betray everybody to get what he wants, and he's always got that going. It's more the comedic villain type on this one. It does work for the series. It works for what his character is written to be. He doesn't get his comeuppance. He's one of the characters you know would get an incredible one. And he's got obviously a great chemistry with the character of Paige, played by Manu Chikri, who I think is actually the best character of this entire programme, if I'm being honest with you. Being part of General Tesla's group, and as episodes continue, we get more of her backstory. We learned she was a medical program droid. She took care of Olivia Wilde, Cora, in a flashback, and it was her meeting the ISOs, which was what led to all of her friends being killed and murdered, with that being pinned on the ISOs, not themselves obviously knowing that it was Clue's army that did that, wiped out a trace of them, all under Tesla's order. So she's got this amazing stuff, and she's got a great relationship dynamic with Beck and the Renegade. When this show is at its best, it is these scenes with Paige, with Beck, them working together, them being against each other, them without the masks off, not with her not knowing he was the Renegade as well. There's some really good stuff that goes on here, and I think this is the biggest disappointment, as we didn't get more of her to see how her story would continue to go, or to be. very much the most developed character of the whole lot, which is really interesting when you think about it. It's the villain's henchman's henchman. It's Clue's generals underneath the sort of level. She's got a rivalry with Pavel. She's got a rivalry with the Renegade. She's not got a rivalry with Tesla, but we know as the audience that Tesla killed everyone she cared for, that she would need to find that out one day. It's so fascinating, and it's such a great dynamic. And to get on an animated series like this as well, I didn't expect that at all watching it for the first time, and she's absolutely the highlight of the series for me. I'm going to talk about a couple of guest stars. I mentioned Olivia Wilde comes in as Cora. Great, they were able to get her back. Loved her flashback sequence. It's in my favourite episode. Aaron Paul is the voice of Cyrus, which you got to think 2012-13. That's around the time of Breaking Bad, like a year or two before it ends. So that's a great name to have got for the series. That Catherine Hunter pops up. For those unfamiliar, she's one of the legendary British actress. I think she's in 2 episodes. She's the program that can like alter the discs and whatnot. Again, thespian legend, popped up in Andor. She was Cyril's mother in that series. She's been Harry Potter, so many other things, so many Shakespeare stuff as well. But it's amazing to see some of the people they're able to get in the show. I know obviously with animated series it's easier, it's voice roles, it's maybe a day of work. Who knows, who jokes about it. You see stuff online about Optimus Prime, Megatron in the films, whatever, when I'm there with the money and stuff. But it's great to see a show like this, and it gives the show a bit of a legacy, it gives it a bit more oomph. And that kind of leads me talking to what I want to talk about with the grid. How is this world designed in this? So obviously it's way more akin to Legacy. So we're going to talk about that more next week with Aaron. But the animation design, as I mentioned earlier, functions so well with what this is trying to be and what this is doing. The series is so much better for it. It makes it much more authentic within Tron, and because it's animated, when it wants to bring in things from 90s to original, it can do so and looks easier on the eye. It can then also bring in things obviously from the Legacy film, create new, whether it be characters, environments, worlds, action sequences. The animation lets the grid flourish, and the series is so much better for that. And I know that they worked with the Daniel Simon, who's the lead vehicle designer on the Tron Legacy film. He was involved from a creative standpoint, I think, with Charlie Bean. Obviously, clearly presenting more vehicles, working with them on designs. The train, for example, has got some really cool stuff that goes on with the train episode, but just seeing how the world functioned, I've really liked. The games obviously have a little bit of difference. Some stuff we know from the film, some stuff we haven't. There's like a jousting version. There are so many cool things done in the series. It really does feel like an expansion, that this is the grid that we see in Tron Legacy, but here's like a different region, different areas of it. Let's bring in the political structure with Clue, about, reporting ISOs if you see them. Let's talk about the war that's gone on there. Kevin Finn's name is mentioned in a godlike mode a couple of times. Selective other characters get brought in. I mentioned Dyson, I think, earlier, who's a phenomenal character. Even though there were security programs, and that there was a war between normal programs not wanting ISOs anyway, and that they would stoke up the fires of those because they weren't created. They were, they emerged from the grid. They weren't created by a user. I love it asking those questions that Tron Legacy raises. Tron Legacy does a lot of the heavy lifting and brings a lot of lore, and a show like this is able to really go into that a little bit more, and it really, really delivered with that. So all the stuff with the grid I love, and I'm going to be very biased to that. A lot of recognises as well, but I just really appreciate what they did with the story, with the design, to keep it away from Clue, if I'm being honest, to not have him as the main villain, because you don't need him to be the main villain in this show. But it's very smart to hand off to a general of his, which, by the way, makes for the final shot being more devastating. The show got cancelled, but I'll get to that at the end. But one of the things that makes the series, that makes this work so well, is the soundtrack. And once again, we have another Tron banger of a soundtrack to talk about. Joseph Trapanese, who I think I pronounced that right, he worked on Tron Legacy with Daft Punk. He arranged the score. So obviously Daft Punk did obviously a lot of the work with that, but when looking at the orchestral side of it, he was arranging the score with them. He had a huge part of that. And he obviously does the entire soundtrack for the series, so he takes some ideas from Wendy Carlos' original soundtrack, the Daft Punk stuff from Legacy, does it at his own twists. It sounds perfect. It works again with the animation. It blends the franchise together to keep a an audio consistency whilst being that middle gap between the two. I believe that when he'd get the episode details, he would essentially do it on a piano first at home, and then he'd start writing around it to bring the synthesizers, the other instruments, and I think the soundtrack's amazing. And it's kind of what you want with Tron, that the two most, ironically more so than the story, not that the story is bad in this, the two most important things it seems from a Tron film is to have great visuals and a great score. And it seems that they've got that on 2 out of 2 films. Whether it's 3 out of 3, who knows, but the soundtrack is really worth talking about. It's worth seeking. You can listen to it. It's not available on vinyl. I think there's been an EP release in the past, but not an LP. But yes, it is really worth listening to as well as watching. And again, it really builds up the fact this is all connected. That isn't just this random other, hey, here's a franchise, let's do something else with it. And that's kind of where it's leading me to talk about this. I'm not going to talk about that later. I want to talk about some of my favourite episodes. In a 19-episode season, I've seen the whole show twice now. My favourite episode by country, I'm just scrolling to get it here, is episode 6, Isolated. That's the episode where Paige and Beck are stranded in the Sea of Simulation. We get her backstory, playing in sync with her relationship with the Renegade at present. We get to see what happened to her, what led to her joining the army to be in that role, that she thinks she got betrayed by the ISIS, but she hadn't, and to see that there is good within Beck, within the Renegade, and she may start to question what side she is on from that point. And it's kind of in line with the structure of what the show, that the first third is all very much here's Clue's villains, here's the Renegade stopping them, Saturday morning cartoon, etc, etc. Then the middle third is a bit of everything, a bit of politics, a bit of what's going on in Beck's personal life, the stuff with Abel when Abel finds out. The only things I'm quite critical of the series is I never care for the character of Cyrus. I don't need it in a non-rude way. I love the design. It's a computer program, like an electronic circuit board, a PCB, sorry. But I never cared for Cyrus as a character. So when he pops up a lot and he's involved in Abel's death, I'm just a bit like, gutted. I like the fact that I guess it isn't Clue's army that kills Abel, that it frames someone else for the involvement. But I'm quite weak on the Cyrus character episodes. But favourite episode, like I mentioned that earlier, I also love Terminal. Obviously it's the finale. It probably wasn't, well, it wasn't written obviously to be the finale of the finales, but it felt like a season finale. It felt like, how do you say it politely? It felt like we're into something like this has a better first season than the Star Wars Clone Wars did, but it took Clone Wars a couple of years to get going. This is the sort of episode that would have cropped up in Clone Wars like season 4 or something, that there's this humongous moment that's going to happen. Tron is actually dying. There's a way to fix him, but we might lose him to reprogramming purposes. If we reprogram and don't stop it in time, he will be reprogrammed into what Clue wants. Now, we know as the audience that that's Rinsler from Tron Legacy, so it's very fair to assume that Tron's going to accept that fate. That's how we get that done, one season and old. But the fact it doesn't, that we end up with Tron being fully healed as the soldier, he is ready to join the fight to be with Beck. The public are standing with him below, that they have turned on Clue's army. And then how do you end the season? You have Clue's entire armada headed to Argon City, with General Tezza not aware, who is suddenly terrified. It's a phenomenal shot within itself, combined with the animation style. And it is unfortunately the most devastating part of the whole season, because you sit there thinking what could have been. Clue could have been a lead antagonist in the second season. Tesla could have been bumped off early, who knows. There would have been other stuff with Paige and other characters. Dyson was on the shoulder, who's already had a lot to do with it. We know that Clue is aware that Tron lives, but only 2 programs know at that point Tron lives. There is so much going on. It's a shame the show got cancelled, and the finale is that sort of devastating moment. And it's kind of where you have to bring in your George Lucases, who were so proud of their ideas. Obviously they owned the IPs and that was Star Wars, but George Lucas didn't change his ideologies of the Clone Wars. That show just continued and evolved, and I think it epitomises some of Disney with their decision making on shows, particularly modern day. I know this is 12, 13 years ago, but Netflix will cancel something after one season. They're not looking at the quality, they are only looking at the audience, viewers and figures. And I know it's obviously different now to 12, 13 years ago, but this show does leave behind a legacy. It did win an Emmy. Alberto Mielgo won for Outstanding Achievement in Animation. The fact this is an Emmy-winning series, got cancelled straight away, is awful. whilst it was reviewed well, the air dates were inconsistent. So the first episode aired, the second episode aired till like 2.5 weeks after. The dates would be changed, the times would be changed. There's no consistency with this. The viewing numbers continued to plummet and plummet. Then you got the mid-season break. It came back. The discussion was there that it was going to be cancelled, and obviously did get cancelled, and the views continued to decline, because I think it ended up finishing, as in the final few episodes were aired at 12 a.m. ET on a Monday. That's the graveyard slot that no one could take or want. And they wonder why it failed, and maybe got moved to that slot because the views weren't doing well. But what I have to say is, if this series had come out in 2020 plus, if this had been on Disney Plus, where there was backing of a streaming giant, of proper marketing, available worldwide on the same channels, the same subscription services, something you could take this show right now as it is, it would be huge. There would be a second season. There would be more people involved. More people would have been watching it. There would have been more discussion. This, unfortunately, just had a really duff release date. Even though it was, I think, 18 months after Legacy came out, it just wasn't either close enough to Legacy, or it's too far attached. And we know Disney haven't really done a lot with Tron as a franchise. It's something me and Aaron spoke about. It's something we'll speak again with Legacy. Might be something I speak about with Ares as well. It's a shame that this is a franchise they don't seem to know what to do with it, because the outcome for an animated show like this is superb. For those 19 episodes, it's better than so many of the shows that have done the leap into animation. There's a better consistency to it. There's the quality. It isn't the IP. You could take this story, wrap it in a Star Wars skin, a Marvel skin, everyone would lap it up, they'd love it. But they don't, because it's Tron, they've not seen it, and I just wish Disney would do a little bit more to push that. So that's kind of also my final thoughts if you think about it. Like, I've been raving about this series for half an hour. It's hard to talk about by myself. It's a shame I don't want to talk about it with, but I'm not going to ask someone to watch a 20-episode season that got cancelled 12 years ago for a review to build up to a film that we're hoping is good, but no one knows because it's Jared Leto. But yeah, Tron Uprising, I think it's a phenomenal series. I think it's a series people need to see more from. If they've got Disney Plus, I recommend watching it. You know that by now, if you're 30 minutes in. I said it at the start for those obvious reasons. I think it's a great series. I actually think it's the best entry in Tron. I know it's got the benefit, right, that it came out after Legacy, after the original, so it's got 2 films to call upon and work on between. There's existing stories that they can develop. It does have that as an advantage. It's got 20 episodes as an advantage, so you can get away with maybe one duff episode because you've got 3 great ones in a row after. It has that benefit, unlike films don't. But what it does for the world building, for the storytelling of the characters it introduces and develops, I think this absolutely is the best story that Tron has had in its 43 years in the public limelight at this point in time, and I'll always champion this series until people tell me to stop, because we know it's never going to come back. I just wish there's a way in which it did in the future. So that is me rounding out. I hope you've enjoyed this review. I hope it doesn't sound like the rantings of a madman. We will obviously be reviewing Tron Legacy next week. That's probably going to be a long one, if I'm honest. Me and Aaron both love that film. I'll be trying to talk about Uprising in that too. But in the meantime, that is me rounding out. Thank you all so much for watching, for sticking with me through to the end on this one, and I hope my ill voice doesn't sound that bad after all. So take care. I'll see you then.